Welcome to Advocacy 101, a three-part series designed to help people to engage in the legislative process, to make their voices heard, and to become effective advocates. Over the course of this three-part series, participants will gain a better understanding of the legislative process, the role that our lawmakers have in representing them, and you'll learn the importance of developing a relationship with your Lansing representatives, as well as learning tips for sharing your story. This series is broken down into three segments. Part one will cover the place, Michigan's capital in Lansing, the people, our lawmakers, the governor and state departments, and the legislative process, how a bill becomes law. In part two of the series, participants will understand the importance of developing relationships with lawmakers and stakeholders. And in part three, participants will learn the importance of telling and sharing their stories. We're pleased to have a seasoned advocacy training veteran and longtime supporter of CPAN, Jean Doss, to guide us through this series. Jean is a well-respected multi-client lobbyist and partner with Capital Services. Capital Services is a Lansing-based multi-client lobby firm founded over 30 years ago on the simple idea that everybody deserves to have a voice in the political process. Jean has more than 30 years of experience as a governmental affairs consultant. She specializes in appropriations, health policy, human services, education, environment, food policy, occupational regulation, advocacy, and leadership training. She's a highly sought after advocacy educator because she's able to demystify the legislative process in a fun, interactive, and engaging manner. She holds a degree from U of M, and I've had the pleasure of working with Jean for many years, and I know you'll agree. Jean, welcome.
Thank you so much. What makes today so special is you have a number of advocates that have been part of the battle for survivors to make sure they have the care they need, the care they were promised. And I would just like to take 2 seconds and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So Maureen, you go first. Just a second telling us about yourself.
Thank you, Jean. I'm a mom of a catastrophically injured son who was 18 years old when his accident happened on Valentine's Day, 2005. He struggled very, very hard to recover and against all the expectations he did and is doing much better than he was predicted to do. A big part of what allowed him to survive was auto no fault. My husband was in the legislature, and even before Sam was hurt, we had been battling the battle to save auto no fault because we had already realized how important it was for recovery of injured citizens in Michigan and how blessed we were to have it. So we've been fighting this for decades. And even more so after Sam was hurt, and even more so after I've met many wonderful friends who are fighting an even harder battle than we fought. So I'm glad to be here today. And I'm also mother of 2 teachers and 8 grandkids. So we keep busy.
Great. Shalise Wilson, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure thing. I'm Shalise. I'm the sister and caregiver to my brother. Both my brother and mom were injured in a catastrophic accident in February of 2008. My brother sustained a spinal cord injury, so he is quadriplegic. He's unable to move his body from neck down. So he's completely dependent on caregivers and people for to survive. Outside of that, I'm a mom, and I have a son who is 7. And prior to the accident, I worked like everybody else. And when they were injured, his knees were so great, and staffing and all of that kind of thing was, kind of up and down. So we jumped on board because that was what he needed to do. That's what he needed in order to live. And that's what I've been doing for the last 14 years.
Thanks, Shalise. And you're still making time for us today.
Absolutely.
Justin, thank you. And Justin, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Justin Savoie. I was injured in 1991, C4 quadriplegic. So, I've been around for a while and know what's going on. We've fought, and I think it was 92, and 2004 when this came on the ballots, and we got it shut down, and here we are again, fighting for our rights. And I'm here for everybody I can be and trying to get things done.
Thanks, Justin. Lori, tell us a little bit about yourself quickly.
My name is Lori, and my son Dan was 11 years old when he suffered a severe brain injury in 2003. He came home, spent 7 months in the hospital, and came home with 24/7 skilled nursing care. And because of that care, he has never been hospitalized for any respiratory issues, for any bed sores. And he has no functional movement whatsoever, tube fed, nonverbal, severe seizure disorder. So the only reason he's still with us is because of that nursing care. And if we don't get a change here, I see that going away in another month or two. So just fighting the good fight with all these good people.
Right. And I'm finishing our round of participants with the St. Amant family. Go ahead.
My name is Linda St. Amant.
And I'm David St. Amant. And my catastrophic car accident was in May 30th of 2003. And would you want to say anything?
Because you don't remember what happened for that first year or two?
Of course.
Okay. Yes, like all of you, what was said to you, mother's worst nightmare, don't know how you get through this. And fortunately, because of the auto no fault, David also is doing so much better than what was predicted for him. Neurosurgeon actually said, you need to get him out of the hospital. We can't do anything for him here, and you just might want to consider custodial care. So, of course, we didn't do that. We found Mary free bed. David was there 5 months. That's where I got to know Lori and Danny. And it's been a blessing to get involved with them again, see them again, unfortunately, on the Capitol steps. But and we've been involved in this battle for a long time, and we will continue to fight for not only ourselves, but actually more importantly for others who don't have the ability, the time, the energy to fight this fight.
So more people get the drift.
More people get the drift and try to help them.
Right. Well, thank you all. And as you can see, we have folks that are somewhat new to this, but some people have been doing this for many decades. And we just want to share a couple tips. We find that, your voices matter, numbers matter, but there are some tips to make us more effective advocates. And so we'd like to sort of go through some things that I think keep people at home. They're a little intimidated, they're a little scared, but if they can have a better idea of how things work, they're going to be more comfortable taking those first steps being an advocate. And the first thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about the process. And, just to be sure people know what we're talking about, advocacy is this sort of umbrella term. And advocacy is like an umbrella, and it has all sorts of actions underneath it. It all comes down to when you're advocating, when you're speaking up on behalf of somebody else who may not be able to speak up for themselves. Then you hear us use the word lobbying, and sometimes you'll hear them interchangeably. Lobbying is a very specific activity where you're asking an elected or appointed official to vote yes, vote no, amend, provide funding when you're asking for something. We're all advocates. We're all lobbyists. So moving on here, I want to first of all talk about the state legislature, the state capitol. Folks on this call know I love this building. And when I'm having a really bad day, just walking into this building can lift my spirits. And it's my building, and it's David's building, and it's Justin's, everybody, it's our building. So the place, it's our third capitol, started out as a territorial courthouse in Detroit. Then when the Michigan became a state in 1837, we had to have a capital that was central and wouldn't give too much advantage to existing cities. So they moved it to what is essentially kind of swampland in the middle of the state, or Lansing. Moved here in 1847 and then started the process of building a capital that's our first state capital here in Lansing. And then we started building something that would say to the rest of the nation and to the rest of the world, you got to take Michigan seriously. And here you can see the very beginnings of this building. I love that picture. And if you stand on that corner, I don't think there's too many other things other than the Capitol that look the same. You see it, the next photo sort of shows it there. That's our finished Capitol. And I just want to say it belongs to all of us. And you can walk in any time that they're in session, Monday through Friday, and walk around or take a tour. So that's the place in Lansing. Now, the next thing are the players. Now, there's no congressmen, there's no U.S. senators. We're talking today about the state legislature and who they are. So starting out, we have in our House, there's 110 seats in our House, our State House of Representatives. And if you can't remember your state representative's name, you say, hey, representative. And we have 38 state Senate seats. And they sometimes get confused with our U.S. senators. These are state senators. But those 148 folks are hardly the end. There are 600 plus office staff, policy staff, communication staff. There's 2 joint Senate and House committees. There's at least 41 House and Senate standing committees. All these committees have staff assigned to them. There's 23 appropriations subcommittees. We've got 2 independent, nonpartisan, incredible resources, the House Fiscal Agency and the Senate Fiscal Agency, which are governed to make sure that they are strictly nonpartisan and unbiased, and they do the analyses of not just budget bills, but all bills that are taken up. And I'm not even talking about the governor's administration or the executive branch. So these are all the players. And sometimes you want to start out by knowing the 2 players that are representing you in Lansing, your state rep and your state senator. But as you get going, you start getting to know their staff. Now, we're not partisan. Interestingly, tragically enough, accidents happen to all sorts of people, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, not just libertarians, not just people that are like, it happens to everybody. And that's what makes auto no fault a nonpartisan issue. But just because we're nonpartisan doesn't mean we're not politically savvy. Because you do have to understand the political structure, the political balance, if you will, of the legislature to understand how it works and why. So right now in our House of Representatives, there are 58 Republicans and 52 Democrats. Now, that means that the leader of the House, a person we call the Speaker, Speaker Wentworth, is a Republican. All committee chairs are Republicans. The committees are all comprised of a majority of Republicans. Does that make Republicans power hungry? Let me tell you something. That's exactly where it would be set up if the numbers were reversed. If you have the majority, you structure the chamber and you structure the agenda and you structure the committees to advantage your particular party in that chamber. Now, people oftentimes blend the state house and the state senate, and they think it's just one big glob state legislature. Oh, no. Over at the other end of the Capitol is a completely different chamber. They have their own security staff. They have their own rules. They don't always get along. And in the state Senate right now, we have 20 Republicans, 16 Democrats, and 2 vacancies that were formerly held by Republicans and are very likely to stay in the Republican column. So again, the Senate is the leader of the Senate. We call him the Senate Majority Leader. Mike Shirkey is a Republican. Now, that doesn't mean the Democrats are irrelevant, but understand we always are careful to be speaking to both Republicans and to Democrats. And our friends, we always have friends and family at Thanksgiving dinner where these differences sometimes isn't fun. This is where the differences are good. You want to bring your Republican friends and your Democratic friends to the Capitol with you because both parties need to hear these stories. Now, our governor's a Democrat, and that often means, as you can imagine, that the Democratic governor and the Republican legislature don't always get along. But as I said, sometimes the Senate and the House aren't getting along either. They're like an older brother, younger brother. And so really understanding the dynamics between both chambers of the legislature as well as the relationship of the legislature with our governor. So the Michigan legislature works in 2-year blocks, and we call it we're in the 2021-2022 legislative session. Now, how a bill becomes a law. This is kind of like asking you all to eat your vegetables. It's not exactly the fun part. And I just want to say, it sounds kind of dry and boring, but once you get involved in this process, you really, it becomes alive, and it becomes a lot more interesting. I would recommend you go listen to that song, How a Bill Becomes a Law. Oh, I'm just a bill. And if there's one takeaway from that old performance, that old cartoon, it's that the process is long and winding, and it stops and stalls, and you have to start over and over again. Oftentimes it takes a commitment. It takes people being in it for the long haul, and sometimes it's a sprint, but more often it's a marathon. Maureen, I think you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to ask, is it possible to go ahead and attend the committee meetings when it's about something you're feeling strongly about?
Absolutely. Actually, every bill that's introduced gets sent to a committee. Now, there are some exceptions and there's some ways to get around the committee process, but generally speaking, bills are sent to a committee. And frankly, there's no requirement that a bill ever gets a hearing. There's no requirement that it ever gets a vote. So just practically speaking, of the thousands of bills that are introduced in a 2-year session, most are kind of dead on arrival. But that committee process is where it is designed for the public to participate. We can't go on the floor of the House. We can't go on the floor of the Senate. The committee, however, is set up for the public to come and share their views and their opinions on a bill that's up in a committee.
Can the public ever be blocked from attending committee meetings?
No, I don't think. Sometimes there's problems with capacity, and during COVID-19, it was really challenging because the rooms, basically they were, much reduced in capacity. But Then we found that most committees now are being live streamed on either the House TV or the Senate TV site. And, if you're disruptive or you're causing problems, it's just like anything else. If you're not going to, be part of the group, just, the decorum of the group, you might be asked to leave by a security officer. But the only time I've seen people kept out is when the room was full and the fire marshal was going to get us in trouble. And I will say one of the good things coming out of COVID-19 is that so many committee meetings are live streamed now. Basically, you can see in this diagram, a bill that is lucky enough to get voted out of committee has to go before the full chamber. If it started in the House, it goes to the House committee, has to pass the House committee to go to the full House. If it's lucky enough to pass the House, it goes over to the Senate, where it gets sent to a committee again. Now, it doesn't change its name, and I'm going to get to that in the next slide. But again, there's no guarantee that Senate committee chair is going to take that House bill up. Just because it got through the House doesn't mean it's going to be moving in the Senate. If it passes the Senate committee, then it has to go to the full Senate, where it has to pass the Senate. And sometimes bills are passed by one chamber different than the other chamber, and both chambers ultimately have to agree. There has to be a vote so that both the House and Senate have voted to pass an identical bill, okay, before it is enrolled or sent to the governor. And the governor, as you all know, has some options. She can sign it within 14 days. She can veto it, or she can do nothing, where normally the bill becomes law. She does nothing, it becomes law. Now, there's a period of time at the end of a 2-year legislative session where a bill that is sent to the governor, but the legislature ends its session. That's during that time. If the governor receives it, the legislature's gone home for the end of the session, she can not sign it. And unlike normal times, it doesn't just become law, it becomes vetoed. That's called a pocket veto.
Wait a second, Jean. Isn't there anything else the governor can do to coerce, if it's something important enough, the legislature to move on something?
Yes. They have to, in the end, no matter how much they may appear in the news to be fighting, they have to negotiate and come to agreement on many things. Legislators don't want a bill to go through this entire process only to arrive on the governor's desk and be vetoed. And every governor, not just Governor Whitmer, can say, you know, if you don't move this bill, I'm not going to be inclined to support other. They need her, she needs them.
Okay.
So the governor can, and the governor also has something that legislators don't have so much of. She has a bully pulpit. Most people in the state of Michigan know who Governor Gretchen Whitmer is. People don't necessarily know who Speaker Wentworth or Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey. And she can use that bully pulpit, and other governors have used it very effectively as well.
So I know one of the obstacles we had, or we're currently having, is when the bill is presented, does it always have to go to the committee, or can they just vote on it?
That's a great question. You're saying, can you circumvent the committee process?
Yeah.
Okay.
So can it go straight to the floor for a vote? Because this is where these bills were stalled, were at the committee.
Yeah.
They never got to the floor.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is a bill that's been introduced, sent to a committee, but the chair is not taking it up and having debate and moving on it, right? So
That's
you're
correct.
talking about this thing called discharging a bill from committee. And there is a process to do that. There's a process in the House and there's a process in the Senate. They have slightly different rules, but a bill can be discharged from committee. Now, generally speaking, you need leadership on your side. The Senate Majority Leader is not going to roll over a committee chair, and the House Speaker is not going to roll over one of their committee chairs and take a bill away from his or her committee. But sometimes it has to happen because, let's say, time is running out, or sometimes there's an agreement for whatever reason. That committee is not the best place, but the bill needs to be acted on. So yes, and there are very specific rules about how that happens in the House and how that happens in the Senate. Now, we talk about, Senate bill this or House bill that, and this can get confusing too. We talked about that 2-year legislative session. So let's look at the beginning of the 2021-22 legislative session. So in January, the first bill introduced, I want to say January, I don't remember the date, 5th or 6th. The first bill introduced in the Senate was Senate Bill 1. That same day over in the House, the first bill introduced was House Bill 4001. Well, why is that? It's because bills don't change their names. They keep their names. They keep their numbers all the way through the process. And we don't want a House bill and a Senate bill having the same number. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a way of making note of changes that are made. So, for example, if a House bill passed the House, got over to the Senate committee, and the Senate committee amended it, it's still House Bill 4000, but now it's House Bill 4000 S-1. Understand, only 20%, 15 actually to 20% of bills that are ever introduced in that 2-year session ever become law. That hill is so steep to climb. Now, obviously, there are always issues that get to jump the line, that have extra octane and move very quickly. But most of the time, it's a very long, arduous process. So we're going to go to the next slide here. This is a tool that I love. When I first started lobbying, there was not such a thing. And this site, the Michigan Legislative website, has so much. You can look up a bill. You can look up the most current version. You can sign up to receive committee notices. You can look at the committee schedule. You can look at the session schedule. You can do basic search of current Michigan compiled laws. There's all sorts of, this is just a treasure trove of information. And I have to pull this site up probably 15 times a day. That's how often I use it. And it gives you a chance to say, friends will say, what is happening with that bill? Like, what's happening with House Bill 5125? Okay, there's a bill that was introduced in the House, obviously, House bill. And the most important thing that you look at after you see the bills introduced is who sponsored it. This is sponsored by Representative Julie Rogers, a Democrat out of Kalamazoo. But I want you to look at all the co-sponsors. I want you to look at the fact that those are individuals from all across the state of Michigan. What else do you notice? I see the very second person behind the primary sponsor, Representative Bizot. That's a Republican, former sheriff from Livingston County. Representative Ryan Berman. So what Representative Rogers did is she waited before she dropped her bill in the House committee office to get it introduced. She wanted this bill to have a coming out party where everybody would notice that this has a lot of support. It has bipartisan support. It has regional support. Now, right there, you could click on that icon and you could read the bill. And then the bill analysis, it's a little bit further down. You can, for bills that are moving, the House Fiscal Agency will do an analysis of this bill. If it was in the Senate Fiscal Agency would do an analysis. So I recommend just have fun. This is, if anything could be said, that it's fun about this advocacy effort right now, because it's so serious and dire right now. But this is a tool to make your life easier, because you all have friends who are saying what's going on.
Can I ask you a question? Because I've had conversation with my senator and my legislator about specific bills, and they're like, oh, yes, I was a co-sponsor of that. What did that bill do? So I felt like they are a co-sponsor, but they don't even know what it is. Like, do they just sort of, oh, my buddy wants me to co-sponsor this, but they don't necessarily support it? Or
yeah, that happens. It's like, what happens is, let's say Representative Rogers knows that she's going to introduce this bill, and what she does, and they'll send out a memo to all their colleagues. So this is a House bill, so she sends out a memo to the other 109 state representatives saying, on my desk is a bill I'm getting ready to introduce, and it does X, Y, Z, and I invite you to join me in co-sponsoring it. And then it's actually attached to a blue piece of cardboard. That's why it's called a blue back. And it has a paper that people can sign their name to be co-sponsors. And yeah, sometimes they do it because they're buddies. Sometimes they do it because they haven't read the sponsorship memo, but their friend on the floor says, oh, this is a good bill. It's a reintroduction from last year. It does X, Y, Z. Now, don't be too hard on these folks. They deal with hundreds of issues. I mean, it's in a given day, there's probably, I don't even know how many issues a legislator has to address in a given day. It can be, a dozen to 20 to 100. And so legislators do form sort of, specialties. I'm a member of this committee, House Health Policy, and I specialize in health policy bills. But I trust my buddy over on insurance, and she lets me know what's going on with auto no fault. And that's okay. It's like, that's the way they help each other. And I want to add, just because you co-sponsored a bill doesn't mean you have to vote for it.
Exactly. I was just going to ask that, Jean. But
yeah.
You can't necessarily count that as, yay, they're in our corner.
Think of it as a good first impression. That's what, but it matters. Now, we're talking a little bit about how it really works, okay? Because everybody's been through civics, and you sort of remember, oh, there's a committee. One thing you'll notice, the more you get to know legislators, the more you get to know their staff, the more you get to know other advocates. Sometimes, I guarantee you, somebody's going to say, well, you know how to count, right? Or do you know how to count? And you'll think, that's weird. Why is a legislator asking me that? It's because nothing gets signed into law without these three numbers, 56, 20, and 1. I've heard it described as the real zip code of the Capitol. What do those numbers relate to? Well, 56, simple majority of the House out of 110 seats. That bill is not going anywhere until it gets 56 votes. And out of 38 seats in the Senate, if that bill doesn't get 20, it's not going anywhere. And by the way, right now that number is 19, but there's a special election coming up next month. And what does the 1 refer to? It's the governor. It's Governor Whitmer. And people forget that you can work really hard on a bill, but you better be lobbying the governor the whole time to make sure we get her signature. Now, this is a quote from, there was a quote from a friend of mine that's a super, super lobbyist. She says, elected officials don't have power. They count power. And that's just to sort of understand that you have to have those numbers for something to be feasible. And when you start engaging with the state legislature, you find out you're not just an advocate standing, outside session or on the steps and talking. You're working in partnership with legislators that are on your side. And they're saying, look, I need somebody from the UP to call so-and-so. I need a constituent from this part of the state to call this legislator. Or we still don't know, so-and-so is still undecided. Can you mobilize some families in that district? So when you really get into this, you realize you're really working as an equal partner with elected officials. And in the end, if we don't have the vote, they will say, I know you want this, Jean, but we don't have the votes right now. And you look at them like, aren't you helping us get the votes? And they probably are, but they need help from constituents in districts with these legislators. So that's, you're going to really know you've arrived when somebody says something like, yeah, he doesn't know how to count. Or they'll say, yeah, Lori knows how to count. Something like that. And everybody knows David knows how to count. He can count that one, Governor. He has. So anyway, so that's really just a real quick, how the legislative process works. And again, it's kind of dry, but once you start doing it, it becomes much more interesting. What have I missed, guys?
If someone other than a lawmaker has an idea for a bill, what's the process to get it before?
Oh, Justin, actually, even though only a legislator can introduce a bill, ideas come from all over the place. And in fact, oftentimes I have a bill idea for a group I'm working with, and I find a sponsor. I will go to a legislator that I think is well positioned for whatever reason, and I will say, would you be willing to sponsor this? So I take my idea to a legislator. So ideas very often come from members of the public, from people that live in their districts who can say, this is a problem. I need you to introduce this bill. And I would probably say that many great ideas are developed by just everyday folks, and sometimes there's a process of talking about it with a legislator, so you finally agree on the approach you want to take. But that's a great question, Justin.
So just to make it clear, to get a bill passed, it has to go through many, many hoops. I think a lot of us underestimate the process and think that just because we put a lot of energy into it, that it should automatically happen. So it has to pass through the House and the Senate with the same language, and then also be signed by the governor in order for it to become a law.
That's right. And remember, this is your issue is as important as it is, and really not many issues of the legislature have to do with life and death. Yours does. But there are still other things going on that have to happen. The state needs a budget. And in fact, remember I told you how most, only 15 to 20% of bills even pass. I can tell you there are certain bills that have to pass or the state shuts down. And what are those? Budget bills. And so you have to have a little bit of, understanding that, okay, right now we have to get the budget passed. And that's why your bills or your issue is on the back burner. It may be on the back burner for a lot of reasons, but you do have to have a little bit of understanding that not every delay is evil. Okay. Sometimes there are just other things going on.
In our We Can't Wait Facebook group, several people have mentioned through this past time period contacting our people in Washington and seeing if they can do something to help us. Can they have any effect on our officials here?
Yes, they can, but remember their hands are full too. And they have to focus on their job description, and their job description doesn't include auto insurance. That's a state issue. I would tell you, if you reach out to somebody, and not that they wouldn't try to be helpful. I'm not going to discourage you. Talk to everybody. Anybody who'll stand still and listen to you, you talk to them, right? But I was going to enlist the help. Do you know who I'd enlist?
Who?
County commissioners, local sheriffs, city council members, school board members. Why do I say that? We're going to get to this a little bit later, but I just described the farm team of the state legislature. Because where do most state legislators come from? They don't very few just run directly for a seat in the state legislature. Many have started their career at the local level.
Hey, you just stimulated another question. If we hear of someone who's going to be running regardless of political affiliation, because honestly in this group, I really haven't seen much of that. It's all one issue. It's not politics. Is it wise if you see someone that has some potential to try to get in touch with them prior to them even getting super involved in the political process?
I think what we've learned from the families that are in this fight, from the survivors, is you talk to anybody, because unfortunately, even though most people have an auto insurance bill that they pay,
They don't get it.
until you go through this, you have no idea. Now, having said that, you all know that the best way to raise people's awareness is spoon feed, little by little. You don't want friends running away from you when they see you in the grocery store. Oh no, here comes Jean. Oh, she's going to corner me and talk forever. So just, just being aware of, educating people gently and slowly. And I think we're getting the wrap-up signal from Martha, and I want to say thank you all.
Thanks, everybody, and stay tuned for part 2.